He was never the loudest person, but his presence had always been strong, grounding everything around him. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, Amy murmured to herself, her eyes following Sundance as he moved restlessly around his stall. Maybe I'll never be able to do it like Ty. The self-doubt crept in unexpectedly, like it always did when she least expected it. Amy's chest tightened, and she felt the familiar pang of grief wash over her. But this time, she didn't let it overwhelm her. She'd spent too long hiding behind her grief, trying to push past it instead of facing it. Maybe that was the key to helping Sundance. She had to face it too. She stood up slowly, wiping away a stray tear, and walked towards Sundance. Her movements soft but purposeful. The horse was still skittish, but as she came closer, he didn't pull away. Amy hesitated for a moment, then reached out her hand, letting it hover just a few inches from his nose. Sundance eyed her carefully but didn't retreat. Instead, he stretched his neck toward her hand, his muzzle brushing against her fingers. The contact was gentle, almost tentative, but it was enough to make Amy's heart skip a beat. The trust wasn't there yet, but it was a step forward. Amy smiled softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay. I'm not going anywhere." Her words weren't just for him, they were for herself, too. She had spent so much time holding on to the past, holding on to the image of Ty and the way things used to be. But things had changed. Ty was gone, and she had to find a way to move forward, to heal. Sundance, in his own way, was showing her that she didn't have to do it alone. Trust didn't have to be rebuilt all at once. It could happen in small moments, in fleeting glances, in tiny steps. As she gently ran her fingers through Sundance's mane, she noticed something she hadn't before: slight relaxation in his stance, a softness in his eyes that had been missing since Ty's death. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Sundance was learning to trust again, just as she was learning to trust herself. But even in the quiet moments of progress, the doubts still lingered in the back of Amy's mind. What if it's not enough? She wondered. What if I can't be the one to help him? The question hung in the air, unspoken. But Amy didn't have an answer. Not yet. All she knew was that she had to keep trying. She had to keep showing up for Sundance, just as she had to keep showing up for herself. If she wanted to heal, if she wanted to rebuild that bond, she couldn't stop now. Jack's voice rang through her thoughts again. "You can't rush this, Amy. It's about the journey, not the destination." Maybe that was the truth. Maybe the healing wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about the small victories, the tiny moments where trust could start to take root. Just like Ty had done, Amy would take things one step at a time, never forcing the horse, never rushing the healing. It would come when it was ready for both of them, as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Amy stood by Sundance's side, watching as the stars began to peek through the fading light. It was a quiet moment, but in its stillness, Amy felt a sense of peace. She wasn't there yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time in a while, she felt like she was on the right path. The next morning, Amy woke up earlier than usual, a sense of quiet determination settling over her as she dressed. The sun had just begun to break through the early morning fog, casting a soft golden glow over the ranch. Amy glanced at the empty space where Ty's boots used to sit by the door, where his jacket would hang, ready for another long day of work. That space felt larger now, as though it echoed with absence. But today, she wasn't going to let it weigh her down today. She was going to try something different. Jack had suggested she visit the memorial they had set up for Ty, a small corner of the ranch where his favorite horse, Spartan, was buried. It was a quiet place, filled with memories of a man who had given so much of himself to the ranch and to the animals. Amy hadn't gone there in weeks. She hadn't been able to bring herself to face the reality of his absence, not fully. But now, with Sundance still refusing to trust her, it felt like the right time to return. It was time to reconnect with the part of her that had been lost, along with Ty, the part that understood what it meant to heal, to let go, and to trust again. As she made her way toward the memorial, the path was familiar, but the emotions it stirred were new. Each step felt heavy, as though she were walking toward something that both scared and comforted her at the same time. The memorial was simple, just a stone marker for Spartan, surrounded by wildflowers and a few framed photos of Ty with his beloved horse. It was a peaceful place, a place where Amy could feel Ty's presence. Even if just for a moment, Amy sat down on the bench beside the memorial, letting out a long breath. The air smelled fresh, the scent of earth and grass filling her lungs. She closed her eyes, letting the stillness of the place wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small spark of hope. "I miss you, Ty," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "I don't know how to do this without you. I don't know how to be enough." The words felt heavy as they left her mouth, but she needed to say them. She needed to acknowledge the pain that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. Ty had been her rock, her partner in every sense. Losing him had been like losing a part of herself. But in that moment, sitting in the quiet of the memorial, Amy realized that part of healing was allowing herself to feel the full weight of that loss. But it was also about remembering the strength Ty had shown, the way he had never given up on anyone or anything. Ty had always believed in second chances, in giving people and animals alike the space to grow. And Amy needed to believe in that too. As she opened her eyes, she felt a calmness settle over her. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it wasn't suffocating her anymore. Instead, there was a sense of acceptance, a sense that it was okay to feel broken sometimes. "As long as she didn't give up, I know you would have said the same thing," she said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "That the horse needs time, just like me." Amy stood up slowly, taking one last look at the memorial. It wasn't about forgetting Ty or moving on too quickly. It was about carrying his lessons forward, about honoring his memory by living with the strength he had always shown. When she returned to the stable later that afternoon, she felt different, stronger, more at peace. Sundance was in his stall, his dark eyes following her every move. She didn't rush. She didn't try to force any connection. Instead, she simply stood there, watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. And he did. Slowly, cautiously, Sundance took a few hesitant steps toward her, his ears twitching. Amy remained still, her body language open and calm, allowing him to come to her when he was ready. After what felt like an eternity, he was close enough for her to touch. She didn't hesitate this time. She gently placed her hand on his neck, feeling the warmth of his skin under her fingers. Sundance didn't pull away. Amy closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the quiet victory. It was a small thing, but it felt huge. She wasn't sure if the trust was fully there yet, but it was growing. It was a start. "I'm not going anywhere," Amy whispered, the words meant for both of them. "We'll get through this together." The bond between them was fragile, but it was real. For the first time in a long while, Amy felt like she was moving in the right direction. Healing wasn't about erasing the pain, it was about learning to live with it, to move forward with it, step by step. And with Sundance by her side, she knew that she wasn't alone. The next few days seemed to carry a different energy with them. The mornings were quieter, filled with a sense of purpose that Amy hadn't felt in a long time. Sundance still wasn't completely trusting, but the progress was undeniable. Each day she found him just a little bit more at ease, a little less guarded. It was subtle, but it was there. He was starting to understand that she wasn't a threat, that she wasn't trying to replace Ty. As Amy spent more time with him, something began to shift in her as well. She no longer approached Sundance with the same urgency, the same desperate desire to fix everything. Instead, she started to listen to him, watching his body language more closely, tuning into the silent conversations they had in the quiet moments. It wasn't just about training anymore. It was about connecting, about being present with him in a way that felt natural. But even as she took these steps forward, there was still a part of Amy that doubted herself. She found herself looking at the empty places on the ranch ties, empty chair at the dinner table, his empty stall in the barn, and feeling like something was always missing. It was as though she was trying to fill the void left by his absence with work, with progress, with the horses. But the emptiness remained, a constant reminder that things would never be the same. One evening, as the sky began to darken, Amy stood at the edge of the pasture, watching Sundance graze. He looked calm, his movements slow and deliberate. And for the first time in weeks, Amy felt a genuine sense of peace. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. He was beginning to trust her. And for the first time, she realized that maybe she was starting to trust herself again. 2. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're doing good, Amy." Jack's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing there, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket, his face unreadable, but kind. "I can see it in how he's behaving." The sun sets over the Heartland Ranch, casting long shadows over the fields. But it's not just another evening, something is different. A horse stands alone in the stable, its eyes wide with distrust, its body tense, as if waiting for someone. It doesn't believe we'll ever return. Ty Borden, the one person who understood this horse better than anyone, is gone. And now, the bond they shared is broken. But the question remains, can anyone rebuild the trust that was lost? The wind whispered. Through the trees, carrying with it a deep sense of loss. The ranch, usually a place of healing and hope, felt heavy that afternoon. Amy Fleming stood outside the stable, staring at the horse she had been trying to work with for weeks now. His name was Sundance, a horse Ty had spent countless hours with, training him, understanding him in ways no one else could. But now, in the absence of Ty, Sundance had become a different animal altogether, guarded. Tense, unwilling to trust anyone, even Amy. Amy reached out a hand. But Sundance took a step back, his dark eyes full of uncertainty. It was as if he could sense that she wasn't Ty. Her fingers brushed the air, but she didn't push. She knew better. Sundance's refusal to trust wasn't something that could be solved with quick fixes or force. It needed patience, understanding, and time. But the question that gnawed at Amy every day was, could she give him those things when she felt so lost without Ty herself? A year had passed since Ty's death, but it felt like only yesterday that he was by her side, his steady presence a comfort. During the hardest times, Yami had tried to move forward, to continue the work they had started together. But the emptiness left by his absence was something that couldn't be filled. Sundance, though, was a reminder of Ty's absence. His behavior, the way he would refuse Amy's touch, his restlessness, all of it felt like a mirror of Amy's own grief. She had never felt more helpless. The horse who had been Ty's partner now seemed to reject her, as if he could sense that. She, too, was broken. Jack had been watching from the barn door, his arms crossed, a quiet witness to the struggle. He knew that Sundance's behavior wasn't just about the horse, it was about the loss they all felt. But he also knew that Amy was trying to do the impossible. Replace Ty's place in the horse's life. "You can't rush this," Jack said, his voice soft but firm. "That horse isn't just grieving Ty, Amy. He's also grieving the loss of his connection with him." Amy closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears. She had heard Jack say it 1,000 times, but today it felt like the truth of it was finally sinking in. She wasn't just grieving Ty. She was grieving all the things she couldn't do without him, things like this. Things that had once been second nature. Now, every attempt she made to connect with Sundance felt like a failure. She let out a deep sigh, her heart heavy with frustration. "I don't know if I can do this, Jack," she confessed, her voice shaky. "I don't know how to make him. Trust me. How do I fix something when it feels like everything is broken?" Jack didn't have an easy answer. He never did. He just walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder, offering the quiet comfort he always did in times like this. "You don't need to fix him, Amy. You need to find a way to earn his trust, just like you need to find a way to heal yours." It was a simple, yet powerful piece of advice. But for Amy, it wasn't so easy. She had spent so much time trying to hold it together, to keep things running smoothly on the ranch, that she had forgotten how to heal herself. And as much as she wanted to believe that things would get better, the time would make the pain fade. It wasn't happening, not yet. With one last look at Sundance, Amy turned and walked away, her mind swirling with questions and doubts. She knew she couldn't give up. But the road ahead felt so uncertain. Could she rebuild trust with a horse who had known a love and understanding that she could never replace? Could she find the strength to heal herself so that she could heal? Sundance too? Only time would tell. The morning sun peeked through the barn windows, casting soft beams of light across the floor. Amy stood at the entrance of the stable, watching Sundance from a distance. His coat glistened under the sunlight, but his body language still screamed tension. He stood motionless, his ears flicking at the slightest sound as though constantly on edge. He wasn't the same horse Ty had trained. He was lost, just like Amy. And today, Amy decided it was time to confront this loss head-on. She had tried everything. Every training technique, every approach Ty had taught her, but nothing seemed to work. Sundance would not trust her. And that hurt more than anything. It was as though every time she reached out to him, he pulled away not only physically but emotionally. She wondered in those quiet moments if the horse had known something. She didn't. Maybe he had given up on ever finding that bond again. Maybe it was easier for him to shut down, to refuse anyone's help, than to risk another heartbreak. But Amy wasn't one to back down from a challenge, especially not when it came to Ty's memory. He had been so devoted to his animals, his work, and his love for her. His methods had always been grounded in patience and understanding, not force or quick results. And that's what she had to remember now. It wasn't about rushing things. It was about creating a connection, a slow, steady rebuild of trust, just as Ty had done time and time again. Jack's words echoed in her mind. You can't rush this. She wasn't sure if she believed him. How could she be patient when every part of her longed to feel like things were back to normal, to feel like Ty's presence was still alive in some way? But Sundance wasn't Ty, and Amy wasn't Ty. They both had their own grief to work through. She realized then that maybe she wasn't just trying to train the horse. She was trying to heal herself in the process. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was what they both needed. Taking a deep breath, Amy stepped forward slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. She had to show Sundance that she wasn't like the others. She wasn't going to push him or force him into submission. She was going to give him the space he needed, just as Ty had done, letting him come to her in his own time. She reached for the halter, her fingers brushing the leather, but she didn't put it on. Instead, she stood quietly in the stable, watching Sundance's every movement. His dark eyes followed her every step, but he didn't flinch. He seemed curious, yet wary. Amy waited and waited. Each second felt like an eternity. Her mind wandered back to the countless moments she had spent with Ty, those peaceful mornings when they had worked side by side, building a bond with the animals. Ty had always had a way of seeing through their fears, understanding them in ways that seemed almost magical. Amy had never been able to fully understand how he did it, but she trusted that his approach worked. She tried to channel that same sense of calm, but the grief still lingered, hanging over her like a cloud. Finally, Sundance took a small step forward, his ears still alert, but his body language less tense. Amy took that as a sign of progress. She moved her hand closer to him, her fingers barely grazing his coat. He flinched at the touch, but didn't pull away entirely. A spark of hope flickered inside her chest. It's a start, she thought. Amy whispered to him, her voice soft and steady. It's okay, Sundance. I know you miss him. I miss him too. The words felt more like a plea than a statement. She wasn't sure if he understood, but somehow it felt like the right thing to say in that moment. She realized she wasn't just trying to heal Sundance. She was trying to heal herself, to find a way to move forward from the heartbreak that seemed to never end. Sundance took another small step toward her. This time, Amy didn't hesitate. She reached out, gently resting her hand on his neck. He didn't pull away. He didn't react with fear. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of the world lift just a little. The bond wasn't fully rebuilt, but something had changed. It was a small breakthrough, but in that moment, it felt like a victory. But the journey wasn't over. Amy knew there would be setbacks, moments where it felt like all her progress had been erased. She couldn't expect Sundance or herself to heal overnight, but this moment, this quiet exchange, was proof that trust could be rebuilt, slowly, steadily, and most importantly, with love. The days seemed to blur together. Amy found herself spending more and more time with Sundance, each morning starting with a quiet visit to the stable where she would simply sit by his side. She didn't rush. There were no expectations. Sundance had stopped avoiding her, but the trust was still fragile, like a thread waiting to snap. There were good days and bad days. On some mornings, he would nudge her gently, allowing her to pet him, and on others, he would shy away, his eyes full of wariness. But Amy didn't mind the setbacks. She had learned something important in the last few days. She had to be patient, not just with Sundance, but with herself as well. She couldn't force the healing. She couldn't rush the process. In her heart, she understood that trust wasn't something you could force. It had to be earned, little by little. Just as Ty had done with every horse that had come through the ranch. One afternoon, as Amy sat in the corner of the stable, the sounds of the ranch were peaceful around her birds. Chirping, horses neighing in the distance. The steady rhythm of life on the ranch was comforting, but it also felt like a reminder of what had been lost. She could still hear Ty's voice in her head, always calm and reassuring, telling her how to handle the animals, how to read. Amy smiled, though it was a little shaky. "It's not as easy as I thought it would be. Nothing worth doing ever is," Jack said with a slight chuckle. "But you're doing it, one step at a time." Amy nodded, though her mind wandered. One step at a time. It seemed so simple when he said it. But for Amy, each step felt like a giant leap, filled with uncertainty. How long would it take before Sundance truly trusted her? And even more, how long would it take for her to heal fully, to stop feeling like she was walking in Ty's shadow? Amy hesitated, looking down at the ground. "I don't know if I can ever really fill his shoes, Jack. I miss him. I miss his way with the horses, his way with me. It's like I can never get it right." Jack stepped closer, his expression softening. "You don't have to fill anyone's shoes, Amy. You're not Ty, and that's okay. He was great, but so are you. You just need to find your own way of doing things." Amy glanced at him, taking in his words. It wasn't the first time Jack had said something like that, but hearing it now felt different, like it was finally sinking in. She didn't need to be Ty. She just needed to be herself. Maybe that was the key to building trust, not just with the horses, but with herself. She had been trying so hard to measure up to what she thought Ty would have done, but the truth was, she couldn't recreate him. He was gone. And that was the hardest thing she had to accept. "But what if I'm not good enough?" Amy asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. She had asked herself that question so many times in the past year, but now it felt like it was coming from somewhere deeper, somewhere raw. Jack's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "You are good enough, Amy. You always have been." His words, though simple, seemed to carry a weight that Amy hadn't expected. It wasn't just a casual reassurance. It was the truth. She had been doubting herself for so long, comparing herself to Ty, and feeling like she fell short. But in that moment, standing in the pasture, watching Sundance slowly begin to trust her, she realized that she didn't need to be anyone else. She just needed to be Amy Fleming, with all her strengths and all her flaws. As if on cue, Sundance walked toward her, his pace steady, his eyes calm. Amy stood still, allowing him to approach at his own pace. When he finally reached her, she gently placed her hand on his neck, feeling the warmth of his body, the steadiness of his breath. In that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. Sundance's presence, though still cautious, was a reminder that trust could be rebuilt piece by piece. She wasn't just healing him, she was healing herself too, slowly but surely. "Thank you," Amy whispered to Sundance, her voice trembling with emotion. "We'll get through this together." Jack, still watching from a distance, gave her a small, knowing nod. It wasn't the end of the journey, but for the first time, Amy felt like she was on the right path. And that was enough for today. The next week passed in a blur of small victories and setbacks, each one blending into the other like the seasons changing quietly, almost unnoticed. Amy's mornings had a rhythm to them now, one that involved patience and quiet resolve. She spent her days with Sundance, each moment with him marking a step towards something. She couldn't always define it, but she could feel it. And perhaps that was enough. The ranch was busy as always, the animals needing attention, the crops to tend to, the ever-present weight of managing the ranch hanging over everyone's heads. Yet, no matter how much work there was, Amy found herself drawn to the stable, to Sundance, as if some unseen force was pulling her there, urging her to continue the work she had started. It was late one afternoon when Amy stood in the barn, watching as Sundance shifted his weight from one leg to the other, his gaze fixed on the doorway. He hadn't pulled away from her in days, and in fact, he had started to nuzzle against her shoulder as she worked with him. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Still, Amy couldn't help but feel a nagging uncertainty deep in her chest, as if something was still missing. Jack, as usual, appeared at her side when she least expected it. He was the one constant in her life, always there when she needed advice or a moment of clarity. His silent presence often spoke more than words could. Without saying a word, he handed her a cup of coffee. Its warmth a welcome contrast to the cool autumn air that had started to settle around the ranch. "You've been quiet lately," Jack observed, leaning against the barn door with his usual calm demeanor. "Thinking about something?" Amy hesitated, unsure how to express the feeling that had been growing inside her. It wasn't exactly doubt, but more like a lingering question, feeling that there was something more she had to learn, something deeper to grasp. I don't know, Jack. I feel like we're getting closer, but there's this part of me that wonders if it's enough. Like, is this really what Ty would have done? Would he have been proud of how I'm handling it?" Jack took a slow sip of his coffee, watching her with a steady gaze. "Ty didn't do everything perfectly, Amy. He made mistakes. But the one thing he was good at was being true to himself. He didn't need to be perfect, and neither do you. The work you're doing with that horse, with yourself, well, it's all part of the healing process. It's not about being someone else. It's about finding your way through it." Amy let out a slow breath, her fingers curling around the warm cup. She had heard Jack say something similar before, but today, for some reason, it felt different. Today, it hit home. She wasn't trying to recreate Ty. She wasn't trying to live up to some impossible standard. She was simply doing the best she could, step by step, just like Ty had. And that, she realized, was enough. As if on cue, Sundance approached, his movements slow but deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze meeting Amy's with an almost searching look. There was something different about him today, something more open, more trusting. For the first time, in what felt like forever, Amy felt a wave of certainty wash over her. This was no longer about fixing a broken horse. It was about healing together, about growing in ways she never imagined. She set the coffee down on the windowsill and took a step forward. She didn't rush this time. She just let herself be with Sundance, letting the moment stretch out, filled with silence and unspoken understanding. Her hand reached out slowly, and this time, Sundance didn't flinch. His body softened under her touch, his muscles relaxing, and he stepped closer, nuzzling her hand with a quiet, trusting gesture. Amy's heart swelled with emotion. It wasn't just the horse that was healing it. It was her too. The bond they were building wasn't just about training or routines. It was about a shared space of patience and understanding, something that neither of them had expected but both needed. "You're doing it, Amy?" Jack's voice broke through her thoughts again. She hadn't realized he was still standing there, watching. "You've got it." This is what Ty would have wanted. Not perfection, just the effort. Amy smiled, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and emotion. The weight that had been pressing on her heart for so long seemed to lift just a little. She wasn't alone in this journey. She never had been. Ty's legacy wasn't about being perfect. It was about giving everything, even when it felt like the world was too much to carry. And Amy was starting to understand that. Sundance nickered softly, his trust slowly blossoming into something real, something lasting. Amy took a step back, looking at the horse with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't about rushing forward. It was about moving at their own pace, trusting the process. Together, they would heal. The sound of the wind through the trees seemed to speak to her, a gentle reminder of how far they had come and how far they still had to go. But for the first time, Amy knew she was on the right path, one step at a time. As she walked back toward the house, the sunset casting a warm glow over the land. She didn't feel the weight of the world on her shoulders anymore. It wasn't gone, but it was lighter now, and that was enough. It was a few weeks later, and the change in both Amy and Sundance was undeniable. The mornings had become a time of quiet peace, where the ranch's usual buzz of activity didn't feel so heavy. Amy found herself waking with a sense of purpose, knowing that each day would bring new progress, new lessons. There was no rushing, no pushing forward in desperation. It was slow, steady, and real. Sundance, for his part, had begun to trust her completely. The tense, restless energy that once defined him had given way to a calm, almost serene presence. It was clear that the bond they had formed wasn't just a reflection of Amy's patience, it was something deeper. Sundance had found a way to heal from the pain of losing Ty, just as Amy was finding a way to move forward. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when Amy felt the weight of the past on her shoulders, when grief would settle in her chest, a quiet reminder of what was lost. But now, she understood that those days didn't have to define her. She had learned to embrace the vulnerability, the moments of uncertainty, and use them as stepping stones toward healing. She wasn't the same person she had been when Ty had passed. She was stronger, more resilient. And she knew that Ty would be proud of the woman she had become, the one who kept going even when it felt impossible. On a crisp fall morning, Amy found herself standing in the pasture, watching as Sundance trotted around, his movements graceful, almost carefree. It was a sight she had dreamed of for weeks, and now it was reality. The horse she had once thought would never trust her was finally showing the world that he had found his peace, his place. And Amy, too, had found hers. Jack stood beside her, leaning on the wooden fence, looking out over the scene. "You've done good, Amy," he said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. "Not just with Sundance, but with yourself too." Amy smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without him," she said, her gaze fixed on the horse, who now seemed to move with a freedom he hadn't had before. Jack chuckled, a knowing look in his eyes. "You never had to do it alone, Amy. You've had all of us here, and you've had Ty with you all along. His spirit's still here, in everything you do." Amy turned to look at him, her eyes glistening with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I just had to learn to see it." The weight of the past, the fear that she would never measure up, had lifted. She had found a way to be herself, to trust in her own instincts, and to lean on the love and memories Ty had left behind. She wasn't trying to be someone else anymore. She was Amy Fleming, the woman who had loved, who had lost, and who had learned to heal as the sun began to set. Casting a warm golden light over the ranch, Amy stood tall. Watching Sundance continue to move across the field, she didn't need to chase after him, didn't need to force the connection anymore. It had come naturally, like everything else that had been worth waiting for. It was theirs, a bond forged in patience, trust, and love. Sundance stopped for a moment, looking back at her, as if asking permission to keep running. Amy nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "Go ahead," she said softly. "You've earned it." And with that, the horse took off, his hooves pounding the earth, his spirit free once more. Amy watched him go, the wind blowing through her hair, feeling a sense of peace settle in her heart. It wasn't just the horse that had found his way. She had too. The ranch, once a place filled with grief and loss, had become a space of healing, where love was still alive, where second chances were possible. And in that moment, Amy knew she wasn't alone, not in the way she had feared. She carried Ty with her, in the choices she made, in the love she gave, and in the way she had learned to keep moving forward, step by step. Together, she whispered to herself. Watching Sundance race across the field, free and wild, just like the future that awaited them both. In this final section, Amy finds a deep sense of peace and acceptance, not just with Sundance, but within herself. She's no longer trying to live up to an impossible standard set by Ty or anyone else. She has carved her own path, one built on love, patience, and trust. The healing process, both for her and for Sundance, has come full circle. And Amy is finally able to embrace the future, knowing that she will always carry Ty's spirit with her.